Faster than a speeding bullet.
I ran until my muscles burned and my veins pumped battery acid.
More powerful than a locomotive.
An idea is like a virus. Resilient. Highly contagious.
Able to leap tall buildings in a single bound.
All right, Jim, welcome to the Better Humanology podcast, man. I am super pumped to have you here today.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so we are going to get everyone fired up with some challenges and recommendations before we get into anything about what you're doing, which sounds pretty awesome, by the way. I got a quick sneak peek before we got started. So let's do a fitness challenge for everybody listening.
Fitness challenge. Okay. Would you mind if I started with mental toughness challenge?
Not at all. So let's start with the mental toughness challenge.
All right. Sorry about that. I just had it down because I got you. So the mental toughness challenge, that's huge for us. I had two ideas. The first one was mental toughness challenge. Train in a psychologically simple or boring state. And what I mean by that is we just trained we talked about before we got on the air, the Illinois High School Powerlifting Association. We had some kids who we like to train without any sort of pump up music. And we try to change even their self-talk. So we put on like meditative music and we talk to them about math class or something like that. We just essentially take the extra little jolt of adrenaline out of the equation and ask people to perform even so. But I guess the biggest mental toughness challenge is something that we talk about in our consulting a lot. I think it's essential to any organization. It's actually an Urban Meyer quote. He talks about the relentless pursuit and then elimination of something called BCD. Have you heard of this?
I have not.
BCD is an acronym for blame, complain, and defend. So the mental toughness challenge I would extend is for a week. I bet it'd be harder than people think, even for a day, to take blaming, complaining, and self-defense out of the equation. So whenever you catch yourself doing one of those things, acknowledge it, and take another look at the situation. And I think if we went real macro with it, I think if more organizations got rid of that, there would be healthier cultures, healthier people, and more positive results.
Dude, that's awesome. And I think you and I are gonna get along really well, because that's two things. Like, so just on my Instagram this week, I posted a challenge for the week, and it was no complaining. And I gave like some, how to do that. And if you're like really addicted to complaining, then I suggest that people, if you still want to state some sort of complaint or grievance, you at least have to follow it up with an immediate solution. That way you can say you're whatever, but you better have a solution back behind it, so it's perceived a little less like complaining. And then also, that's something I challenge my athletes to all the time. We call it the no motivators workout. If I could put them in a white room with a barbell, no music, and just like, let's see what you actually have. Let's actually let that internal self talk and see what happens. See what kind of, we call it meeting yourself. Meet the inside of who you are and really find out who you are, which is people don't do on a regular basis, man. So that's awesome. This is going to be great.
Yeah.
So let's roll into the fitness challenge from here.
All right. So the fitness challenge, I was like, okay, so we, like I mentioned, we started a strength program, went from 80 to 1430 in a fairly short amount of time, and scaling is important. And for that reason, we have to write a lot of stuff down. But I'm always tentative at stuff like this because, like, when I was thinking about how to answer this question, I was like, geez, I love Atlas stones right now. And there are some companies out there that make really highly durable Atlas stones, but it's like canvas and sand and stuff like that. So it's a little safer. Love that kind of stuff. I love flipping tires, and I'm like trying to put together this fitness challenge, this workout, sprint, flip, throw, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm like, and it kept occurring to me that just like as we grew this program, we don't like to have people outside of our watch. Because technique matters, and it's not always the workout. It's oftentimes the work ethic, and most importantly within that, posture and technique, while really, really banging out a good workout. So I guess the fitness challenge would be for anyone in their most difficult moments, in the most trying times within a workout, make sure that you are as self-disciplined as can possibly be, and never lose sight of posture and technique. It sounds super basic, but it really is kind of at the core of who we are. And I don't care if it's running, you see it all the time. We just had a group out on on the grass, 30 minutes ago. By the 10th sprint, you look like a kid running through the playground. So the challenge would be, do not lose technique even when tired.
Yeah, even if that means you have to slow down a little bit, right?
For sure. Exactly. And I think that's that self-reflective state, being really in tune with what you're doing. If the standard is perfect technique, then don't worry about the extra step or the extra second off your 100-yard dash time, whatever it is. Focus on the technique, and there's some mindful kind of athletic awareness of knowing when to pull back. So yeah, even if you get to pull back just a little bit on the intensity, lock in the technique.
I think that's great. I know that's a reflective of my own personal fitness journey, as things kind of got lopsided with form and intensity, and then you kind of have to do an ego check, which is what I had to do. You really take myself down a few notches, be like, well, I'm actually going to have to lift a little bit less weight, but I'll get back. I'm just going to have to perfect it. And then, hey, I might do these workouts a little bit slower than I once did, but I'd rather do every single repetition perfect than worry about some sort of time. And it can be frustrating. It is a huge ego check, but I think an awesome challenge and something I think people should try.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. I think that's it's amazing when you are in tune. It sounds like you definitely are with your own athletic experience. It becomes hopefully easier to translate that for other people, because that's where a lot of my stuff came from too. When I was in college, I won't name any numbers so it doesn't sound like bragging, but I got pretty darn good at deadlift and cleans especially. But they were garbage probably. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it wasn't until recently where I put like a lot of weight back on the bar and tried to clean it with terrible form that things start to like act up and hurt. That wouldn't have bothered me when I was 23, but they're bothering me now. Yeah, but you're right. It's an ego check, but it's the most important one. I'd rather have the ego check now than be broken at 50.
Yeah, the chronic injury forever. Yeah, that's
right.
Nobody wants that.
Right.
All right, man, how about a book recommendation? Now, this could be something you read recently, or maybe just a book that was impactful in your life.
Yeah, no question. It ties really well into these first two. Self-Reliance. It's a book of essays. The title essay called Self-Reliance by Ralph Waldo Emerson. It is, it's just like, it's a text that I return to more regularly than anything else. The book I gift most often and give away is actually another good one. It's This Is Water by David Foster Wallace. It's actually just it's a really short capture of a speech that he gave at Kenyon College on graduation. So I think either of those two, but if I had to go one, it'd be Self-Reliance for sure.
All right, awesome. Well, I appreciate that. Now let's hop into two things. So maybe a little bit about your background personally. I would love to hear more about that. And then if you could take us into the Good Athlete Project and how that got started and what you're doing today.
Sure. Yeah, I think hopefully that'll flow pretty well. It's all kind of one long trajectory. So I played sports growing up. I played in high school. I played all through college. I went to a small liberal arts college, Knox College. It's one of the best colleges on earth as far as I'm concerned. And played football there and did fairly well enough to get an opportunity to play after college. So I went to a couple of tryouts, ended up playing for two different arena football teams, indoor football teams. And that was solid. I kind of answered some questions. Knox is like I said, it's an incredible liberal arts institution. It's a Division III non-scholarship. And at the end of my career, I was kind of curious if I had in me what it took to play at a higher level, just out of curiosity's sake. I love my teammates. I love my experience. Didn't want to change that at all. Just, I had an itch to scratch. So I went on to the indoor league and got to play against some guys that were like, Big Ten scholarship guys. I remember one day in particular, I had to go up against a guy in one-on-ones who had just gotten cut from the Minnesota Vikings. So I got to kind of experience that. That was a blast. And then I still felt like it was kind of missing something, to be honest. They were, like I said, great experience. Met some cool guys through that, but the motivation somehow had changed. In high school, I was nuts about football. It felt very pure. There was no added incentive other than the desire to be around my teammates and playing this game that I loved. College was very similar to me, especially because there wasn't a scholarship on the line. It was just we were showing up, doing our best for each other, playing the game that we loved. And as I continued, it wasn't NFL money. It was nowhere near it. But all of a sudden there's a paycheck involved. And the locker room conversation goes from, what are we going to do this weekend and how's so-and-so, but whatever, to, hey, I heard Columbus is getting a new coach and they need a quarterback. And I'm thinking about, switching teams or whatever. And we had guys in their mid to late 30s still clinging on to the dream of making it to the league someday. So again, like no judgment, but something felt different about it. Something had changed. So I went from the Arena League to Europe, the European Federation of American Football, and played for two different teams out there. The first one was absolutely life-changing. It was, I'd gone through this whole process. I had a fun and fairly successful college career. I went on to the indoor league, and it answered some questions for me, but something was missing. So all of a sudden I start throwing my name out to these teams in Europe. And one day I just I talked to a guy who I'm still friends with. His name is Mark Thompson for the Limerick Vikings. And shortly after that, I was on a plane to Ireland, not totally sure where I'd sleep that night or who was going to pick me up from the airport. But I had a place, and guys named Seamus and Coney picked me up from the airport, and it started one of like the most incredible journeys of my life. Spent about 6 months over in Limerick, Ireland. We won a national championship over there. We won the Shamrock Bowl national championship. Had a decent amount of success. I will humbly but importantly say that I was the MVP of that league. It was awesome. It was awesome. And I say that because then I got another opportunity after that. And I went over to Spain to again play with Coney and a host of new and cool people over in Valencia, Spain. Dude, it was crazy. And man, I'm so happy for this conversation because I get to relive this again a little bit because it was just incredible. We were living on the coast, going to the beach whenever we wanted, working out, eating healthy. And we ended up winning a Spanish national championship.
Nice. That's awesome.
Yeah, man, it was awesome. And then we ultimately, for my third season, I went and played again in Ireland, and we won another championship in a real tight game against the Dublin Rebels up in Belfast. And it was just a blast. It was really, really cool. Anyway, so that was my athletic career in a nutshell. I also did some powerlifting throughout that and had a decent amount of success in powerlifting. It was always kind of a supplement to my football, and I felt like a strong football player instead of a true powerlifter, and that's okay. Anyway, so then I came back to the States, and in between seasons, I was always working at this place called New Trier High School, which is a 4,000 person institution with really high academic standards, really high athletic standards. They really do a nice job blending those two as well. And we started the first strength program at the school. So started a strength program at New Trier High School. We started with 80 people. Eventually, we grew that program to this past year. We had 1,430 was our number. We're one of the largest high school strength and conditioning programs in the nation. And we also have a staff of 8. So we have interns, we have a lot of part-time employees, and they just do an unbelievable job. They really, really do. I can't say enough about the staff that we've got going here. It allows us to be really good for a lot of kids. And then we just keep kind of scaling up from there. When the thing started picking up momentum at New Trier, we started something called the Illinois High School Powerlifting Association so that we could get to other kids at other schools, train other coaches, and that was amazing. All through this time, I was actually working on a master's degree at Northwestern University, which is just down the block from us, where I finished in creative writing with a focus on poetry. And then I went off to Harvard to study human development and psychology with a focus on cognitive neuroscience. And it was there that the Good Athlete Project was born. So the story of that very briefly is I was sitting in Todd Rose's neuroscience class, and I think people should look up Todd Rose. He wrote a book called End of Average, which has changed the way that I've thought about a number of things. But I'm sitting in his class in the fall of that year, and we were talking about attention and retention. So the networks of the brain and the environmental stimuli that force one to pay attention and then record that information. Like, this is important enough to look at and then recall or remember. Remember. So all of those things, or at least through my filter, all of those things sounded like sports, like novelty, cooperation, powerful models, all sorts of really interesting social dynamics, heavily laden with emotion. And if people don't get it through the filter of cognitive neuroscience and social theory, I just say this: like, I have never, and I take myself seriously as an academic, I have never shown up to a history class or even a psych class, and I love psych, shaking with excitement. But I was that way before every Friday night in high school and before every game I ever played, probably, just like thousands, if not millions of other young athletes around the world. So there's just something there. There's something really powerful in athletics. So we've got this, and then I kept reviewing it. I was like, listen, we've got a platform within the education platform that's 40 million people strong, that ought to be the most powerful platform out there, through the lens of cognitive neuroscience. And then my question became this: are we using it like that? Are we using it to its full potential? Do we recognize sports as the learning platform that it could be and probably ought to be? Or are we just trying to win games? Or are we doing it for more self-serving purposes? So then it was actually the next term that I took an independent study with a guy named Rick Weisbord, who's now an advisor to the project and has become a friend. He's just a fantastic human being, where we did sort of a landscape analysis of other existing character development programs. Because we say this all the time, like, we didn't invent, we weren't the first to think that you could teach for other things through sports. We just think that we're doing it in a way that potentially is more effective. And if nothing else, more well considered than a lot of existing programs. And that's not to discredit anyone whatsoever. I hope people continue to join this cause from whatever angle they want to. I think it's an important space to be in. We just want to be certainly a leader in it. And I guess that's where this picks up.
That's awesome, man. And so, what would you say? What's the main thing that you are trying to do or help people do in this kind of learning through movement, learning through athletics? What are you trying to help people do, or should I say how to do it?
Yeah, so I think step one is acknowledging the power of the space. I think the initial maybe miss for people, and this is why you see sports gone wrong as a headline too regularly. Just acknowledging the power of the space. I've been on sidelines and heard things like, what's the swearing policy on this podcast?
You're clear.
Okay. These aren't my words. So I've been on a sideline. I've heard things like, get to the quarterback and break his fucking neck. And I paused. I'm like, and I'm intense. Especially when I'm in the moment, I'm usually one of the louder voices and the more intense people, but I'm like, how could you possibly mean that? How could that come out of your mouth? Do you actually mean that? Man, I'm getting choked up just thinking about it, because and we hear from people, when we consult and do professional development workshops and stuff, you hear people say, well, yeah, it's exaggeration, it's hyperbole. They know what I mean. And we are coming from the position of, no, like, they're 16. They don't really know what you mean. Like, you're a 30-year coach or whatever the situation might be. You know what you mean. But what are you telling people to do? So in this really heightened state. So step one is always acknowledging the power of the platform. Step two becomes like, what we try to figure out. Say we go to work with a coaching staff. We try to figure out what people's purposes are. And one thing that I think differentiates us is we believe that character is individualized and site specific. So we don't think there's a universal version of character, if that makes sense. Like, if you want to swear, like, I think we can be more thoughtful than that. But if you want to swear, okay, that doesn't make you a bad human being necessarily. If you're swearing to degrade and put down someone, perhaps, but the use of curse words doesn't necessarily make you a bad person. You want to, like, drink beer, okay, it doesn't make you a bad person. And maybe that's kind of mildly off track, but the point is, we like to go in look at everything case by case, ask a group of people what they want, what is your purpose, and then we do the probably more difficult work of making sure one's behavior matches their goal. So what that might look like, we might enter a space, a team in California, a basketball team in California, and not go in and say, here's what you need to do. Say, what would you like to do? What are the barriers to impact that you've seen? What are some of the troubles that you've had doing the thing that you want to do? Let's see if we can work together to set up an actionable plan to overcome those barriers and accomplish the thing that you really want. And let's say that's whatever, teach for character, or have a team that's really focused on academics or community service, whatever that might be. And then we just ask of coaches that really, really hard question. Does your behavior match that goal? That same individual that said that thing on the sideline, you get to the quarterback and break his neck, did identify that being good to kids is his primary concern. I believe him for sure. I just don't think his behavior maps onto that. So that's really what we do. We like in a lot of our interaction, we're almost like the way a consulting firm would come in and consult a business. We come in and consult with teams to make sure all of that is aligned.
And what are some of the goals that you're coming across as you work with more and more organizations that the coaches have that they're looking to get out of their players and their people?
Mm-hmm. It all comes down. It will, when you can really get to, you talk human to human. People talk about overall human development. People talk about making sure that, and when we buy into this fully, making sure that we're teaching kids things. I'm going to call it loosely life lessons. Teaching kids things that will transfer into their lives on a greater and more important scale. We want people to be good students all the time. That's actually a really interesting one because that's where a lot of the gaps are. I think a lot of coaches say we want to be good students first, but and I'm not trying to call people out, but other than saying that at practice every so often, there's not a whole lot of behavior that matches that. But some version of human optimization, good people, good members of the community. We hear good brothers and sisters and sons and daughters and things of that nature. That's usually where people start. And then comes the next question. We say, hey, okay, so coach, what are we doing to accomplish that goal? And that's where the conversation really cracks open into some interesting stuff. Yeah,
and I think it's very, very fascinating what you're doing because I can, as an athlete myself, and just being really into fitness, a majority of my life, I know I actually attribute a majority of my, let's say, my success in life as a father, as a husband, as an entrepreneur. I actually attribute that a lot to just fitness. Finding the discipline, learning a lot about yourself and what it takes to get through hard things. And it starts off small, but it can get so big. And I think people who aren't as into that or maybe weren't into athletics a lot don't understand it as much. And you're harnessing that because it can happen in like one-off. Like it happened to me and there was no good athlete project, but you're trying to make it happen at a bigger like organizational level, not like 1 and 2 people get out and like happen to have this amazing experience and turn into a good person. You're trying to do it at an organizational level. And so like, what are some of the tactics or techniques? And I know it's probably individualized to the organization to some degree, but like, what are you doing to try and help people turn them into, and I'm going to use the word better humans, because it really sounds like that's what you're trying to do.
Totally. And absolutely. I'll give some takeaway techniques, but I just have to touch on that because you're exactly right. I think it happened for you. I think for every story of someone who learned life lessons through sports, there's at least the same amount of stories on the other end of that. And I don't think that's okay. I think we have to be more intentional. Like you said, I think we have to do this for as many of these kids as we can. We don't, I've been lucky to be invited to present a lot recently. And one of my opening slides in almost every presentation I have is, you want to know one of the biggest myths in sports is that sports teach life lessons. And I say that to be a little bit provocative, and I kind of let it simmer for a second. But I start with that. Sports don't teach life lessons. Well-intended teachers and coaches use sports as a platform to teach life lessons, but it doesn't happen on its own. And I think that's a huge part. There's ownership on the part of the coach. We have to recognize that Could you learn life lessons through basketball or football or soccer? Of course, absolutely. But I don't know a lot of people who are just shooting baskets in their driveway who are learning the sort of things that you and I got out of our experiences. And yeah, reflecting on my own experience, I say this kind of jokingly, like but I believe it. I'm like, I don't think I get into Harvard. I don't think I go to Harvard if I don't go through doubles as a football player. You know what I mean? I really do believe that, because I don't think I'm exceptional in a ton of ways, but going through going through some of that stuff gave me the confidence in my work capacity, if nothing else, to push through on these things that maybe, I don't want to go over the top. I think I think everyone has the capacity to do it. I just don't think enough people tap into that capacity, and work ethic was one thing that I took from my experience. Now, I think if a coach were to say, I want work capacity to be one back end transferable quality that my kids learn from their experience with me, then I think there's tons of room for it there, of course. But it's intentionality that matters most. And I think as far as like takeaway techniques, that would be the first thing that I would say is, what is your actual purpose? Mission statements are really hard for people to write sometimes, but like, if we didn't count wins and losses, and I almost don't want to start there because we're supposed to, I'm not on the side of soft coaching, but if we didn't say, like, what would you feel good, like what would make you feel good about your career at the back end of it? That's a good way to start a mission statement. And let's say it is some version of human optimization, teach things that help kids be good for the rest of their lives. That's where the real specifics start to take shape. Because if you say I'm looking for human optimization, and one component of this, let's say it's a growth mindset, if we're going to tap into some of the recent research. Is that a familiar term, growth mindset?
Yeah, and so Dweck and also Grit with Angela Duckworth,
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally right. So anything that's kind of being researched and proven out to provide longitudinal success to kids, say, okay, fine, I want to teach grit, or I want to teach growth mindset. The very first thing, and I'd recommend this to anyone, it's what we do in our workshops, but you could do it with a piece of paper at home if you're really being self-reflective, is just say, like, let's name something. Let's name something. You don't have to be, you can teach for other things as well. But what if you were to anchor your coaching practice in a certain amount of concepts? And what if growth mindset was one of them? That now gives you a place to reflect, plan from, and reflect on, if that makes sense. So that's actually a really good one. Is there a running back drill that you could use growth mindset? That's right. Is there a running back drill that could incorporate growth mindset that you get a little bit better at every time? That there is an increasing level of difficulty and complexity within? Is there a growth mindset drill? That's actually what we just did that today. What was it? 3 hours ago, we did something just like that. We add complexity to it. But back to your point, takeaways, dude. And like I said, I talk a lot and I've had some coffee. So if I ever go on a far tangent, feel free to reel me back in. No, dude,
it's awesome. The more I kind of understand the big picture, just to give you a background on this podcast, we call it Better Humanology because, we train a lot of athletes, have a lot of athletes in our program, and the fitness, the diet stuff, that's all, to be honest, relatively easy. Like, especially after you have a lot of experience, and I don't mean easy for the person. I just mean, like, we're going to give you stuff that works. And we know it works just from experience and how many athletes we've had. Now, the better humanology aspect this is our goal because we know it's not actually to be disciplined. It's not actually easy to always have a growth mindset, that kind of stuff. And so that's a big reason that's the things that we try to hit on this podcast. So I'm 100% in line with everything you're saying. So yeah, I mean, if you want to take it any direction you want, no problems here whatsoever.
Love it. But I want to make sure that the better humans, the people in process of being better humans, get some tangible takeaways too. So I'll give an example of one that happened fairly recently. We're talking about communication. We wanted to improve communication and build trust. So, and I think that could be, I say that because that's a universal hope for people, I think. Improve communication and build trust within the team. So we actually did some silent workouts. So we've got a team full of people an essential component of that is a really explicit preface. So bring everyone together, tell them exactly what the expectations are, talk about how we're going to spot each other. When we do something like that, you shouldn't introduce a new exercise on that day. Only things that they're fairly familiar with. And then we say, and we don't want to hear a freaking peep all day. No music, no words, no nothing. So it actually it's pretty cool the way kids begin to interact. There's just a very organic way of communicating erupts. And the trust part, it's like, dude, it's so cool to watch kids spotting each other and not having to ask for it. Nothing like that. It's just the expectation. You're about to go. I got you. So the silent weight room has been a fun one for us. And here's the other one that I would say, some of the most common complaints from coaches are, my kids aren't paying attention. They can't focus. They're goofing around on the sideline. Or here's one we get often with a variety, colorful language on all ends of the spectrum. Like, we teach it to them practice. They won't run the freaking play in the game, or some version of that. All of these could be in some way tapped into and enhanced by mindfulness. And mindfulness is just such a huge and important thing, I think, in all of education, certainly in athletics, that people are shying away from. It's probably the thing that might help our kids the most, and people are simultaneously shying away from the most. And I think it's because we've got this idea where, like, mindfulness sounds a little soft at first glance. But if you look at it through the lens of, like, the neuroscience literature, mindfulness is broken up into two categories. It's open monitoring and focused attention. And if we're talking about, like, focused attention training, like, isn't that exactly what we want? So part of the thing, or one of the initiatives of the Good Athlete Project is we want to reframe some of these terms. Like, mindfulness is not soft. We should be incorporating some kind of, just even if it's 5 minutes a day, some kind of mindfulness training into our programming. It's hard to do sometimes. You got to build trust first. Sometimes you got to frame it correctly. But if you think about it, let's apply it to sports. When it is whatever, it's the final drive in the fourth quarter of the Super Bowl, Tom Brady is not thinking, he does not have an us versus them mentality of, we're going to go out and we're going to rip the throats out of Team X and I hate those guys and blah, blah, blah. He's the calm in the storm, right? He's in a process of analysis. Like, does he get intense, or does player X get intense? Sure, fine. But they have to set the tracks before they barrel down them, which requires analysis and focus. So, like, again, back to that scenario, final drive, quick survey of the field. He's got to communicate well. There's a blitz over here. Check the blitz protection, or the front protection over there. Okay, they're running cover 2, corner sat, safety bit on the dig. The corner route is going to be open. I got to step up in the pocket because I know I've got one free defender on the outside and chop that off. But it's analysis. Without that sort of ability to focus, to be the calm within the storm, there's only so much that one could accomplish as an athlete. So some sort of mindfulness practice feels like a solid takeaway if people are open to it. Yeah,
and I think, mindfulness has definitely come with some initial pushback, maybe the term or something. But to be honest, I've seen they started introducing mindfulness in the military a while back. Navy SEALs do it. They have programs in the Army and the Air Force, everything now. And it's a lot better received by, what I've noticed in these actual programs in the military. It's a lot better received by the younger soldiers and sailors and Marines and stuff. Like, they are more open to it for the most part, but it's generally the middle-aged to older, especially the salty guys in the military who are like, I'm never going to do that in a day of my life. And it also reflects down on the rest of the young guys don't want to do it, right? Because they're like, oh well, the senior guys are not doing it. Have you noticed? And I lead all that up to ask, have you noticed any sort of, like, you're trying to promote a mindfulness culture? Do the coaches ever be like, you ever get any pushback? Like, yeah, that's great, man. You can do that for the kids, but I'm not, whatever. That's not really my thing.
Absolutely. It's funny. We were just down in Oklahoma City. We had a Coach for Kindness clinic down in Oklahoma City at Athlete Inc. Our friend Jared Gaihello ran it. It was awesome. It's like kind of a mini professional development day. It was tons of fun. And we had a guy. Look, I'm a football coach, but we had essentially like a stereotypical JV football coach at the event, which was great because that's who we want to talk to. We want to talk to anyone who's interested in doing this work. But he was he was big. You could, maybe wasn't practicing what he preached, meaning like he was a little heavier set. And Jared walked up to him between presenters and just said, "Hey man, how's it going? What do you think about all this stuff?" And the guy goes, that's all right. It would probably work, probably better suited for like a golfer or something like that. That's not going to work for our football guys. So yes, initial pushback. Now, the funny thing about that situation was this gentleman did not realize that Jared is a freaking former NFL fullback that he's talking to. And it's like, it's like, so you think you know what tough is? Well, tough is doing this. And like you said, like some like Marines, we got Marines, guys in the Air Force doing some version of this. Like, I think the biggest issue, at least as far as I found, and honestly, as I think about it, like, I don't care if I'm calling people out. This is the truth. We just have to confront the truth. Radical candor, right? So, I think the people who are most resistant to it are either, like you said, so far down the path that we just might not be able to get them on board, or they're the ones who might have something to prove. Like the toughest dude in the bar is not the one picking fights, generally speaking. Right. If that makes sense. And if you're confident in your degree of quote toughness, and you actually do want to provide value for kids, and you hear the research and believe that mindfulness can help, then forget if you think it's whatever. Then get over it. That's a long answer to your question, which is, yeah, we do see resistance, and it really just language is so important, man. Like, mindfulness has a stigma attached to it. If we called it focused attention training, or if we called it like calm within the storm training, or if we called it like fourth quarter quarterback training, it would have a totally different ring to it.
Yeah, and that's what. Are you familiar with Mark Devine from SEAL Fit? So he,
Sounds familiar.
Former Navy SEAL. He runs a company called SEAL Fit, and he trains people who want to be Navy SEALs. And he's really big into mindfulness meditation and stuff. And I had a conversation with him about this, just us both being military, and I was like, what kind of pushback are you getting? And so he just like had to eliminate the words at first, like, meditation. Like, so he just, he just calls it box breathing now, which is basically just a way to do breathing and meditation and mindfulness. But he doesn't start there, especially with anyone he feels is going to be resistant. He's like, no, we're just going to do some breathing practices, calms your mind, get you ready, so on and so forth. And I'm like, yeah, that's kind of how you have to approach it sometimes. Now, what are some things that you are doing with the athletes for mindfulness? Is the silent training part of that, or are there more techniques that you guys are using?
Yeah, totally. First of all, yeah. So the mindful, the silent training, like, that's mindfulness in a way, right? It's sort of quieted focused attention. Now, the mindful purists will say, no, it's not. Like, I've read the Bhagavad Gita. I understand some of the roots of where all this stuff came from, and I'm not discrediting that at all. I'm just saying, like you and like your friend, the entry point's got to be right. So, for example, we took it from the field to the classroom. We worked with some resource students, some students who needed a little extra help with, they got extra help with emotional and focus concerns. And we're like, we've got this classroom full of kids. We're trying to do mindfulness training because it improves focus, but the population we're working with, like, can't sit down and focus. Right. So obviously there's this we can't ask them to sit down and focus to improve their focus when that's the thing that they can't do. It's this immediate paradox. So we actually use movement mindful movement to get into a breathing practice. And then down the road, once we've got a little bit of buy-in, we get into a visualization practice. So like what that would look like is we show up with the students. We always give rationale first with this stuff. We're like, hey, if you just talk about breathing, they're like, dude, I breathe pretty much all the time. What's the deal here?
Gotta get a little more buy-in.
Exactly. Well, here's what we're trying to do. A lot of times we'll reference like, okay, so it's a basketball team. Let's talk about how Kobe Bryant practices mindfulness and like, these kind of things and the champions. So you generate a little bit of buy-in, meet people where they are, give a rationale. Then we go to a movement prep where it's a lot, usually just like some lunge variations, just traveling a certain distance, 15, 20 yards, lunging, starting to be quiet and to breathe and to focus and to work posture and to just be conscious of our bodies in space and where one joint aligns to the next. And that then becomes hopefully the entry point to the very first breathing component, and like your friend, we do some box breathing. We do some very simple nose to mouth breathing, in through the nose, fill your lungs fully, out through the mouth. Make sure that you're filling your belly up, that, belly breathing, make sure you're using your diaphragm and not just tight chest breathing. And then we'll slowly, it's just about reading the room. I call it the prod and respond method. So like it's like you just poke and see how somebody reacts, right? So you just have to read the room. We've had groups that jump on this and we can get into visualization within a day, within, session 1. And we've had groups who are a little more skeptical and that, it's only by session 4 and after we've played games and done other stuff to kind of build trust that we get to the mindfulness stuff. So yeah, being able to read the room. And I'll tell you that the funny part about that is that probably takes mindful behavior on the part of the facilitator too. So I think we all should be doing it.
That's awesome, man. I really like what you guys are trying to do. I think this is an incredible project. And I think if I were to kind of like look at it big picture, you're kind of helping people set their overall mission statement to some degree, right? And I think you had a really good practice about doing that. If we were to take out wins and losses, like what are you trying to achieve in your program and do, and then you tie that down to the exercises or drills and things that they already need to be doing, and then how can you incorporate some of the characteristics you want to build in these people. Now, have you found that there's a certain level, like you're trying to work on too many things? It should just be one thing or two things or three things. Like, is there kind of a cutoff there that you normally recommend for people in this overarching process?
Absolutely. So, and I think about it for myself and for our people too, because the Good Athlete Project is almost like an umbrella concept. Like we do a lot of things. There's a lot underneath us. We have basketball camps, we have powerlifting meets, we have consultation. There's a lot there. So the key is to identify what your anchors are, right? There are certain things that we are not going to move from. This is the kind of concept. This is what we do, and to ensure quality before quantity, we usually work in 3s and 5s. For whatever reason, if we have found success in that, 3s and 5s are very successful. And when that's too much, 1. And what I mean by that is like, especially if you're talking to an individual about like habit change and behavior change, let's start with one thing. Develop a system of successes. I can do this. Empower someone with their own agency, and then let's look at 3. And like, here are the 3 things that if we get better at these 3 things, we'll be in a better spot. And then progressing from there. For example, one thing, we have 5 in our weight room. So like the anchor concepts to our weight room are, safety is first. And one of the general rules of nonprofit work or any work in education or with kids is do no harm. So if all we do is move people through our experience and keep them safe, both in the, first off in the immediate, don't hurt anybody in the weight room, but then hopefully be able to predict to the future and keep them safe on the field, the court, or the pool, whatever, then we've really done something. We've done something pretty good. And then if we move on to number 2 would be character, right? If we can keep them safe and teach for character, like, this thing's moving in the right direction. Number 3 is leadership. So safety, character, leadership. Like, we've got a better athlete already. Number 4 is community. So these are our anchors. So if we can develop trust in the community, the individual, the immediate team community, and hopefully branch that out to even higher purpose beyond that, like all of a sudden, like dude, this work is meaningful. We're doing something really special. And then number 5 in the weight room is performance. So if they can see a positive outcome of all this work that they put together, now we've generated a really tangible, quantifiable feedback loop for these kids. So we've got safe, healthy athletes who have enhanced their character in ways which differ by population. They're now leaders in that, and it's know the way, go the way, and then show the way to the others. Community, faith in a group that's bigger and more important than you. We all know this. Like, working out in a group, you push yourself harder than when you work out alone. So do this for your teammates, and then finally you see the performance end. And that results in successes in probably more quantifiable ways. But point is, 3s and 5s, to answer your question more directly, 3s and 5s. Beyond that, it becomes a little trickier.
I think your work is absolutely phenomenal. I want to get to the quick fire questions of the show if you're ready.
I'm ready.
What's the hardest workout you've ever done?
The hardest workout I ever done was sprint the straightaway, jog the curve, and it was I remember very specifically. I was going to my senior year of high school football. It's super basic. We echo this to our athletes all the time. It's often it's not the workout, it's the work ethic that determines the quality of the outcome. And I guess I was young and dumb enough at the time to not pace myself on the sprints. And dude, we went like 15 minutes of sprint the straightaway, jog the curve. And if you're actually trying, it is a beast. That was the only time I've really like thrown up from a workout.
Nice.
So yeah.
That's incredible, man. All right. In your opinion, what's the best activity for building mental toughness?
The best activity for building mental toughness is like I was trying to think of the right way to phrase this, but like you got to be in the shit. I don't know how else to say it. Like, it's almost like the SAID principle for physiological adaptation, specific adaptation to impose demand. Like, if you want to get tougher, you have to experience some tough stuff. And I hope that one's like social and emotional and relational situation is positive enough that that's not where it's occurring. But like I think we need to push ourselves more often. Like I said, I would come, even though I was exhausted coming out of doubles, every time I went through them, some part of me was like, heck, if I can do that, I can do a lot of things. And that doesn't even compare to what the military is doing. But like you have to go through it, right? Like I think self-talk, I'm huge into self-talk and like using the appropriate language to see like what you've learned transfer into the rest of your life. But you can't transfer an idea necessarily, right? Like you can't hype yourself up and be like, I can handle this because I'm tough. That doesn't really make sense. You can say, I can handle this because I've done similar things before, right? This isn't too much different from when I did that. I got it. I can get through this too. So I think you got to be thrown into the mix a little bit.
Love it. Now, if you could only have one piece of equipment to train with for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Okay, so I thought about this. And I think, dude, you're either going to like this or you might hate me for it because I'm kind of cheating. I would say nature. So I would want to be out in the world, like running up hills. If I could find like a stump or a rock and like run up hills, I could be happy and achieve a high level of fitness, I think, just with the natural environment like that. In fact, I was out in New Hampshire not too long ago. And that's literally what I did. I just picked a tree and I ran to the tree and back. And then I had like an old tree stump and I just like did like almost like Atlas stone stuff with it. And I picked another tree and ran there and back. I felt amazing.
Yeah, I've done some of those workouts and they are a lot of fun. And we could, to fulfill or grant the wish, we would just make sure you live in a really awesome location you have access to, streams and rivers and rocks and all that. Yeah, that awesome, dude.
I appreciate it.
All right, the question of the show, what is the best advice you have for becoming a better human? And this is 100% open-ended.
Yeah. So I guess I would start by saying the best advice I ever got is chase the work you're willing to do. And I think that's just helped me so much. For whatever reason, at a very young age, because of the support that I had in my life from my parents and people around me, I just never felt that embarrassed of doing things like I mentioned. I I was playing fullback and collecting a paycheck for playing fullback, and while pursuing a degree in poetry. It just never bothered me. I was playing college football, and I was a studio art major. Now I am not making my living through poetry, but I do think that all of these things have influenced and enhanced the way that I do my job now, in really, really important and unique ways. And like I said, that was the best advice. Chase the work you're willing to do. And I guess this sort of hidden importance to that is like, because eventually there's no such thing as work, if that's the case. And I will say this, it's far different than saying chase your passion, because like I really like eating food and drinking coffee and whatever, reading books and going to the beach and stuff. But like that'd be my passion. I can't make a living off of that.
Right.
But chase the work you're willing to do. Like I'm telling you, unless I'm like sleep deprived because I stayed up too late the night before, unless that is the case, I'm never upset about coming into the office, or going to the gym or to the field. Like I'll do this work. This is the truth. It's a cliche. It's true. I would do this work for free. No question.
That's awesome. And great advice. I think that's way better than saying follow your passion. Cause sometimes I think people get, and I think sometimes people feel guilty that maybe they're not following their passion or something else like that, but it's not. If you are super passionate about making a good cup of coffee, I mean, I guess you could go be a barista or something like that. But at the same time, like if that's not going to really propel you through life and not what you ultimately want to do, you don't have to do it because you're passionate about that. You chase the work you're willing to do. I think it's an amazing way to go about it.
Totally, dude. And the thing about passion is, it undulates, it goes in waves, it changes. So if you're banking on passion to get you out of bed in the morning and get to work, that's like, there are going to be days where you're just not feeling it, but that's not an excuse to not go to work. In fact, if you don't mind, I'm going to quote a quick study just to illustrate that, because I think it's super important. And I won't be able to quote the author of the study, but there was a monkey in a cage essentially, and the monkey eventually learned, it was a chimp. The chimp learned to hit a lever a certain amount of times. It was 10 times, and they had him in fMRI electrodes, however they were measuring. They measured the dopamine release in his brain, and I will say, just for ease of use, I'll say it was like 10 units of dopamine. That's arbitrary, but 10 units of dopamine in response to this raisin result. And the chimp kept doing it, similar amounts of dopamine. All of a sudden, 2 raisins came out. So he hit the lever the same amount of times, 2 raisins came out, and the dopamine production spiked to like 20. It doubled, which is crazy. Okay, maybe understandable. Another study to kind of enhance the idea that novelty is important. A new reward just doubled it. But then over the course of time, and it wasn't very long, the 20 came down to call it like 15. Right. So he got used to that. He had changed his threshold, his reward threshold, and that came down to 15. All of a sudden, probably a week later, he hit the lever and 1 raisin came out. And all of a sudden his dopamine levels dropped to like 7, 6.5, 7, somewhere in that range. So the exact same stimulus produced a different dopamine production in the brain. So if you talk about like the feeling of passion, it's just not something that we can bank on because our thresholds adapt. And actually coffee is a good example. Like a cup of coffee now is not the same as the first cup of coffee that I had because of these metabolic, like these thresholds that I've developed. When I had my first cup of coffee, it was bouncing off the wall.
Right.
So that, passion, it's great to bring passion to everything you do if you can. But if you're banking on a feeling to go to work, to follow through on your obligations, to provide value to others, that might put you in a tricky spot before too long.
That's great. All right, Jim, I know people are going to want to learn more because the Good Athlete Project is absolutely amazing. Definitely very, very in line with, what we're doing and how we feel basically. So where can people go to learn more about the Good Athlete Project and the work that you guys are doing?
I think, thank you, first of all, and thank you for having me. The best place to find out about our work is on Instagram. It's at Coach the number 4 kindness, Coach for Kindness. And just quick tag there. People are like, why Coach for Kindness? And we're like, why the hell not? We think enough people are coaching for toughness, or so they think. And we thought we'd stir the pot a little bit. So Coach for Kindness on Instagram or Twitter. We also have a great group of people working on our website, which is about to be updated. It's just goodathleteproject.com. And you can find the rest of the contact info there. We got all of our emails are up on the website. And we'd love to hear from people.
Awesome. And we'll link to all that in the show notes. Jim, it's been great having you on the podcast. I really appreciate your time.
Appreciate it, man. Thank you very much for having me.
Your best. Losers always whine about their best.